Hello and welcome to Unsourced Wall. My name is Elvis and as always, I'm your host. Okay, so this is going to be kind of a packed episode. I'm going to have to do some quick shots and, well, try to get through all these reviews. It's been quite a lengthy week. Also, at the very end, I'm going to be doing a full review on the newest release of the season, Dark Phoenix, which is hailed as the grand finale of the Fox X-Men universe. And so I'll be doing a spoiler-free review right before it. I'll put a time code and everything in the description. So look out for that. Anyway, let's get on right into this because there's a lot to cover. Let's start off some movie news. And first up is the rumor that Quentin Tarantino is producing a film adaptation of the crossover miniseries that had Django from Django Unchained meet up with Zorro. I don't think there's anything really confirmed. I think they have tapped the director, but that's pretty much all that's been done, so it's not really far along. Honestly, I just think that, well, I'd rather see the classic versions of each character meet up if we're doing a movie. Not that I don't like Django Unchained, but I just didn't really have an affinity for it, and I think that if you're going to be doing a crossover, then tying it so directly to one version might be a bit odd, and I don't know, it just seems very specific. Because Tarantino's Django is just really different, so it kind of loses a little bit of appeal of seeing a crossover. In any case, I still think it will be neat if it ever does come to pass, because crossover movies can be and should be, and sometimes really are kind of fun. Let's move on to some quick shots, because like I said, there's a lot to get through. And so, the Black Adam movie has finally found its director in Wam Colette-Serra, who is also directing The Rock's Jungle Cruise movie, and so best of luck to him. I hope they keep Black Adam a natural villain. The Rock promised that, so I hope to see that happen. And even if they do a kind of anti-hero type thing, I really hope they play up the tragedy and like his fall. So fingers crossed for that. Next up, we have the first look of the Wonder Woman poster, which shows her in full body gold armor, which actually looks pretty cool on its own. It's just that the poster itself has this very garish neon rainbow backdrop, and it's kind of hard to look at. I think that's mainly because it just seems so neo 80s that we see so much, and it really doesn't work most of the time, and it just seems really out of place here. But the design of the costume looks fantastic, and honestly, the first thing I think of when I see something garish as that and something as over the top as that is like Cersei or Dr. Psycho, both villains who have been rumored. So, if that's the case, then I'm all for it, and I can't wait to see more. Let's move ahead to some TV news. First, there's no beating around the bush here. Swamp Thing has been canceled. I mean, we all already knew that because, well, it was pretty obvious once you cut 3 episodes from the season, but now it's high profile news. It sucks because the first episode was actually pretty good, and so was the second, but we'll get to that later. There are a lot of rumors going around, from creative differences to the budget to some tax rebate thing with North Carolina. Blame is being spread everywhere. I don't think that there's one solitary reason that's been confirmed or been really agreed upon, so whatever happened, well, there's no getting past it at this point. I hope that this season, while having been cut down a sizable amount, is still able to bow out gracefully and actually feel succinct and doesn't leave up on a huge cliffhanger, because that would be salt in the wound. Another rumor has surfaced that HBO or the CW is thinking about saving the show, and well, I wouldn't hold my breath about that. It seems like a long shot, especially since I don't think it fits either network. And in any case, being canceled is a way better fate than being on the CW, so I guess it's kind of a lose-lose situation. I just hope that the show itself is good and remains good. And apparently WB is reevaluating the DC Universe streaming service in general in the lead up to launching their own, so the days are numbered. The writing is on the wall, and maybe Swamp Thing was just the first of many to get out the door. Let's do some more quick shots. Netflix has renewed Lucifer for a 5th and final season, so best of luck to it. I hear season 4 was good and left plenty of room for things to wrap up solidly. Happy and Deadly Class were also cancelled, both by Sci-Fi, and both are now being shopped around to other networks. Godspeed, and I hope their fans find some reprieve, because I think that, well, either really should get another chance. We also have the first look of the Netflix series Cursed, which is based on the young adult novel that Frank Miller is illustrating. I've talked about it before, and it's about the origin story of the Lady of the Lake. We have a promo shot showing, I guess, the main character holding Excalibur. It's just an unprocessed look anyway, and it might be really early on, so maybe it's meant to look kind of dopey before we get to some of the cool stuff, but fingers crossed for that. Now, lastly, we get into some comic news. The big one this week is that there's been rumors that Vertigo is on the verge of shutting down, which hasn't been confirmed, but it's easily believable given how badly their lines have been doing lately, especially that big relaunch, and the rest haven't made a splash at all. And then you have the Sandman Universe reboot where no one talks about any of them except for The Dreaming, and I like The Dreaming, but it's not something that I feel is gonna be a huge major hit. So fingers crossed that's just people jumping the gun, because despite how it is right now, it would be a shame to see it shutter down. I just think it needs a real definite guiding hand behind the wheel, which it just doesn't seem to have right now. Oh, and lastly, we have that Neil Gaiman has said that work on the final issues of Miracle Man might start soon. Neat. It's been like 5 years, but we'll see it if it ever does work out or even happen or materialize. I wouldn't hold my breath for that either. Now let's move on to what I read this week. First off, we have The Dreaming number 10. And as we're continuing to move back into the main plot, this was a wild issue to dig right into. We have this insane and rampantly unchecked AI that's in charge of his dreaming right now, along with Dora's own journey that actually embodies an intensely ephemeral tone. It's not the most rollicking issue so far, but it's definitely among the ones that have given me the most pause. Just a way to give a sense of unease that really unnerves the reader toward the AI, but also manages to bridge together a heartening and introspective ideal for Dora to forge for herself. This is really an issue that's focused totally on her, but in a very certain and now very practiced way. We might not know much more about the character than we have before. We are getting to see her acknowledge and learn more about herself as a person, as her identity internally, which is fascinating and engaging in an odd but very effective way. The AI is just a baffling character, but purposefully so, and leads to some very intense and frightening moments. So whatever head it's coming down to is surely going to be about pure chaos, and I can't wait for that. This series might have slowed down a bit, but it's also not letting that get in the way of acknowledging the emotions that it wants to get across. A huge part of that is Bill Quisevely's amazing artwork, but nonetheless, you need both. It's a powerhouse punch of an issue, so I love it. 2 thumbs up. Next up, we have The Green Lantern number 8, and this issue was a blast. It's kind of a chock full of the reasons why I feel like this has been the best Hal Jordan comic book in years. It doesn't pull back any punches when it comes to his characterization or the extremes of that kind of personality, but also keeps it in check when it has to, balancing out the insane storylines that serve to highlight that with a very strenuous bind. It's pretty much perfect, and this issue is among the craziest, but also the most tethered together. It puts Hal and Green Arrow in the middle of some borderline wacky alien shenanigans that's so out of context for what they're doing, and you have the pitch perfect wooling dynamic of Ollie trying to cope with all this bullshit. It's hilarious, endearing, and so readable. I know this issue goes in some confusing directions, I've heard that complaint, but it's the perfect foil to their relationship. Even early on, you have Ollie begging Hal to be more down to earth and grounded, and then he's just riding a dragon will construct. It's wonderful. It's a madcap issue. It's a bit more self-contained than the previous few, but it sets up a lot of great ideas, like Sinestro returning, finally free from Scott Snyder's Justice League bullshit, so I can't wait. I really can't. 2 thumbs up. Next up, we have Shazam number 6, and well, I have to say, I'm dropping this book. There's some fun stuff in every issue, but everything else, like the majority of each issue, is just so resoundingly dull. I couldn't talk about it if I tried. It's just boring, bland, sterile story beats thrown into a blender. There needs to be something more, at least something a little bit genuine feeling in there for me to care, to give a little bit of a shit, but there isn't. Instead, all there seems to be is just this lame adherence to movie synergy. I can't care. It's like the negative void of caring. Synergy is such a backwards and uninspired way to go about things, and I can't support that if that's all it has to offer, and that is all it has to offer. I wish I liked this series more, but I can't like it enough to overlook the fact that it's a negative space. There's nothing there. It just plods along. If it ever gets far enough to do something interesting, I'll pick it back up again, for sure, but so far it's even worth less to remember it. 2 thumbs down. Moving along, we have Sharky the Bounty Hunter number 4. This was just a bad issue in an already middling miniseries. Like, the mini was already nothing to write home about, but it could get some fun lines or a set piece in there that had a little bit something underneath it, you know, while hewing to some type of character. This issue has none of that. It kind of edges near being a complete mess, just very staunch and strict character and narrative beats with no real glue or engagement. It's like a checklist. It's just so perfunctory. Plus, Bianchi's art just looks rushed and underdone all over the place, which is a shame because their art was the highlight so far. So this really leads to a huge step down overall for the mini. It's just not exciting or entertaining, even in a visceral or basic way. It just feels so standardly played out. And so what's the point? Characters and plot just jump around because they need to, and it approaches the same threadbare nature that really turned me off Huck or Chrononauts or Empress. So yeah, not good. I'm actually kind of disappointed, despite how much Miller has already been laying me down lately. 2 thumbs down. Moving ahead, we have Stray Bullets, Sunshine and Roses, number 41. Apparently, this was the penultimate issue of Sunshine and Roses, and if so, I have no idea how they're gonna pull this off. That's not a knock against this issue at all. In fact, it's insane that they could come back after a 7-month hiatus and not miss a beat. Then again, they once came back from a 10-year hiatus, and they knew how to play it then. So this issue pretty much retells the previous 2 issues from different perspectives, which is fine and all, but it means that we haven't really moved the plot forward at all that much. In fact, it means that all of the threads that were hanging in the air are still there, still dangling. This could have run for 60 issues, at least, with how much it has going on. So I wonder what will happen in just one issue. It's either going to be a skillfully done collage or a complete mess. But this issue in itself isn't. It's just got the same old charm. It's got the whole bloody, cynical, bleakness, humor, and heart. And it's a great ride. It's always been a great ride. And it even tries to downplay the mystical quality that they've been building up in the past few issues, which is a great move. I love how it gets down to business with the love character and Vic, who have this insanely fun dynamic, plus the rolling thunder of disaster forming around Beth and Orson, which is a joy to see crumble down on them. I love this series. I hope it sticks the landing next month, and I can't wait to see where the next arc takes us. It's gonna be exciting, for better or worse. 2 thumbs up. And lastly, we have Criminal number 5, and I've said it once, and I'll say it again. It was a goddamn miracle that this series was able to get me invested in a lawless storyline. I've always felt like those storylines, which do have their strengths, get overplayed and are almost a stranglehold on the series at times. This one though, it kind of plays it pitch perfectly. We get the beginnings of one at the start of the relaunch, settling down a very weary end of the line style tone, something that remarks wholly on the character and nowhere else, but then immediately for the next couple of months, it shies away to other diversions, totally getting your mind off it. And since it commits to such a weighty hook, only to pull away at the last second, it's insanely effective at getting you interested. At least it got me interested. And even in this issue, when it comes back again, it's taken from an out-of-context viewpoint. It's all about the setup of the outside perspective, and it's doing an incredible job at it. It's enrapturing to see the come down of the lawless patriarch, and it's pretty damn, well, engaging and interesting to get an in-depth look at the little twists of fate that are starting to coil around everyone. That's just one of the best things about crime comics, how exacting and precise the stories can be in their tragedies when done right. All the pieces fall into place. And so it is done like that here. I can't wait to see Teague Lawless die, but it's already feeling gutting and eerie, and I don't even like the character. So far, I love this relaunch, and I hope it has so many more stories ahead of it. 2 thumbs up. So overall, kind of a great week. You can never go wrong with that. Moving ahead into what I watched this week, let's start off with Swamp Thing episode 2, titled Worlds Apart. This was a pretty damn good follow-up episode, despite the fact that it was definitely much jankier than the first one. It just didn't have the same sort of consistent through lines that the first was able to employ. The first is more about setting the stage, and so had that to directly focus on and build a core around. This episode was trying to juggle developing more of that core, but also introducing new elements, and so didn't quite feel as balanced. Still, the things that were brought forth here are still pretty interesting in their own right. I think that the only things that didn't quite land, or didn't even have the time to do so, were elements like Daniel Cassidy as the Blue Devil, who gets the screen time of a small gag or reference and feels kind of superfluous in doing so, almost CW-esque. But knowing that he'll be more important as the show goes along, and the actor playing him carrying himself way more than any other reference gag would, helps to mitigate that a lot. In a long view, a lot of the quibbles that I have with this episode are offset like that. It's just that this second episode has a very deliberate feel in how it wants to take its time, rather than just stalling for the sake of it. The main leads help a lot with that, because they continue to sell their respective scenes as much as they can. I'm really enjoying Crystal Reed and Annie Bean's take on Abby and Alec. Even in the very strained bits, like this part where Alec goes off about how over the moon he is about Abby in his video log she finds. It shouldn't work because it's so damn corny, but the energy and affability the actor gives it makes it hit. I really hope we get to see more of Bean as Alec as the series goes on, because I definitely will miss him. And that's not the sideline Derek Mears as Swampy either, because I think he does a really great job here in his few proper scenes. So many subtle and sometimes not so subtle aspects of his movements and body language feel like they're committed to the tragedy of his situation. And he's awesome at it. I love Derek Mears. I think he's a great talent. Overall, yeah, there's a lot to love about this show. The drama is still appropriately soapy without going over the edge, and the horror and gothic elements almost feel like they're a much better version of what Wes Craven was attempting tonally, which is a good thing. It's definitely a slow burn, but the next episode is called He Speaks, so I hope he does. It would be really weird if we got a title character who just grunted and roared. That would be just way awful, I think. But I have trust in them. And so, well, I hope that trust isn't broken in where the show is headed or whether or not it gets saved. Also, I have to say it, but Crystal Reed's final scene has her trying to use a facial expression to embody the sentiment of, holy shit, the guy I was vibing with turned into a muck monster of superhuman size and strength, which can't be easy. It really can't. But she goes for it, and I say bravo. One thumb up, one thumb middle. And there's lots of room to improve, and I hope it does. Can't wait for next week. Alright, so here we go into the Dark Phoenix review section. I'm going to start with the spoiler-free review this time. At the very end of it, I'll place a time code for you to skip over the spoiler section into the listener questions. But let's get started with this one anyway. It's going to be a short one because, well, it's kind of hard to describe in really vague terms. It's kind of a mess of a movie. It might be the messiest movie in this franchise, this side of X-Men Origins. It even reaches levels of chaotic that Apocalypse, which I also liked, never dared reach. Yet like Apocalypse, it still has, well, moments of greatness. Yes, it's rushed. Yes, the villains are insanely underwritten, but the actors still bring it. The movie has a somber core and tone that mostly lands, and the final act has one of the best action scenes in the series, and also an oddly serene, elegant, and wonderful denouement. It's not the best, but it's a far cry from the worst. People calling this worse than The Last Stand or X-Men Origins, well, they're insane. Or I had to think that they haven't seen those movies in a long time. Nor should they. I don't really understand why they would, but still. For as warped as this movie could get, and for as fast and loose as it could feel, it hit where it wanted and landed steadily, if not grandly. Definitely one of the middles, but at times, a beautiful middle. Overall, 6 out of 10, one thumb down, one thumb up. Alright, so we're going to get into the spoiler section. I advise you to look into the time code below in the description. If you want to skip over it, I'll give you a couple of seconds. Alright, so let's get on into the deep end of it. In terms of messiness, it's pretty simple. The movie has less of a plot and more of a general idea of where it wants to go next, and the characters are subject to the whims of whatever scene has to happen. First we get a prologue, then a space shuttle scene, then a team party, then the start of an alien invasion straight out of a horror movie, then a whole lot of minor character beats, and we even get Genosha thrown into the mix. It's less like Whiplash and more like seeing a very odd series of vignettes play out. It's not hard to be reminded of how X-Men Origins felt like, or that X-Men Origins might have had a cleaner set of events playing out in sequence. It almost feels like this is an extra long episode of a series we haven't been watching, and so all of these are plot threads we're just playing around with and just getting dunked into. It feels cluttered and could have been easily streamlined or even heavily expanded. Either or, because right now it's at a crossroads of really sort of trying to juggle things and very handily dropping some, but like dropping them in terms of like where the pacing and momentum is going. So that is a shame. But that said, none of these moments, even the dropped ones, are bad, not in isolation. Each works and it has a very definite mood and tone to it. And most of the time, more often than not, the actors are giving each scene their all. Or, surprising even me, Kinberg's directing reaches actual engaging heights. Scenes like Nicholas Hoult as Beast grieving Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique, which is brimming with anger, resentment, regret, and despair, is, well, palpable. It's a small, intimate scene with James McAvoy, and it feels like there's a powder keg about to go off between them. It's taut, it's tense, and it's so wonderfully done. There's so many scenes like that between characters, between actors, for respective moods. Like you have Cyclops' defiant and adamant and staunchly, preserved love for Jean, and also the fraught nature of the relationships the X-Men have with each other that just kind of, well, bubble up, and it feels very, very tactile and tangible. It's pretty wonderful. Like I said, I'm using the word wonderful a lot because I kind of like the entire center of this movie, not in terms of like the story, but like just the emotional center. I think that it was so well done. Even Mystique's obvious death rides the fine line between corny and subtle. Like you have this little moment before she completely passes on between her and Beast, and it could go over the top and have them say I love you, but instead you just have Mystique bubble out nonsense syllables that you understand are her trying to say I love you, but she's just too far gone to actually say it, and it's just heartbreaking. Like it could have gone the extra mile and been completely silly, but no, it pulls back, so just a little silly, but also really, really heart-wrenching. I love it. I love that. And another great example is the aforementioned alien introduction scene. It's effectively scary. It's shot and executed insanely well, and honestly, incredibly frighteningly. It's awesome. The aliens themselves, let's call them Skrulls. They're not called Skrulls in the movie, but let's just call them Skrulls, are the worst written aspect of Dark Phoenix, with their dialogue and exposition being outright painful most of the time. But their roles and set pieces like that are outstanding. Like, they are an effective force whenever their mouths are closed. There's also just this indelible tangent of dread and bleak hopelessness that is embedded in pretty much the entire movie, sometimes less gracefully than others, such as Jean's lashing out at Cyclops accidentally being played up as though it were an abusive relationship. But it's also the best and most consistent thread in the movie, because the entire movie, which was meant to only be a part 1 to a trilogy, can then create a new core around that, around fighting that. It helps to give something that wasn't meant to be an ending enough emotional height that it gathers momentum to be engaging. Characters are losing their way, others are being reaffirmed, and many are being pushed to the brink. It's a rolling thunder, and while the middle act of the movie definitely drags and almost collapses, the way this all comes to a head in the finale is kinda impressive. Nothing groundbreaking, to be sure, but for a movie that is this messy with structure and had such a troubled production, it hits its marks with grace. And the grace is the denouement. As I've said before, it's kind of beautiful. Just the way she and Professor X come to terms, it's like an extension of everything X2 was implying between them in the best of ways. And her powers majestically overflowing into the final conflict is genuinely enchanting. And it's not The Last Stand. I'll never understand that. The dread and defeatism of The Last Stand and of the early parts of this movie are now co-opted by confidence, self-assurance, esteem, and security. There's no crying until Wolverine kills you. Jean takes it into her own hands, and it's radiant. It's truly radiant. How people compare the two movies is ludicrous. Oh, and right, it doesn't help that the train sequence that happens right before that is fucking awesome. Holy shit, it's great. I doubt such a scene will be topped for a few X movies after this. But yeah, overall, it's a messy movie. The first act is jagged, but punctuated by great character moments. The second act is slow and kinda painful at times. And the third act is, well, it's magical. I would rather a messy movie with moments of, well, true greatness than outright terrible. And the way it ends, it doesn't feel like a conclusive ending to a 20-year-old franchise. It just feels like we're saying goodbye to these characters. For now. Like, there could be more coming up. Not that there is. We know that for sure. But it does leave it open. It feels like, well, maybe it's not the end. And maybe that's for the best, because we know that Days of Future Past epilogue happens here. We know that Logan's epilogue happens here. We know that Cable exists. So it's not meant to be like, close it off with a huge capstone, because this isn't the end. The future still happens. And there's hope for it. Even if Logan is very, very despairing, there's also hope in that. And there's also hope in Deadpool 2. I think this was a really graceful landing. The movie overall was far from the worst and not nearly as good as the best. But overall, solid 6 out of 10 if you like the franchise and you know that this is probably going to be the last time we see these characters. 1 thumb down, 1 thumb up. And that's a large 1 thumb up. And if you went to the time code, we've skipped over to this part. And so now we can start off with listener questions. Our first question for today is from the amazing Akicat on Twitter. And their question is, what is my favorite Pokemon? Now, I answered this question before, and it was obviously Ditto. I love Ditto. I thought he was really, really funny whenever they used him and showed him in the anime. So let's just do a top 3. So the first one is Ditto. The second one has to be Meowth. Again, because of the anime. I don't play these games, so don't judge me, but it has to be Meowth. I don't care if the other ones don't talk. He's still a pretty adorable cat. And third place, that's gonna be a bit of a tricky one. I'm going to say Charmander. Probably Charmander, because he's adorable too. He becomes a dragon. That's awesome. So yeah, Ditto, Meowth, Charmander. Let's get to it. So yeah, no, those would be the top 3 for me. And well, thank you for that question, Akicat. It was really fun. I hope that my choices weren't offensive or very lackluster. Our next question comes from the ever great Mitch Gosser on Twitter. And their question is, what class in the game/comic die do you want to be? Would you want to be Fool, Emotion Knight, Dictator, Godbinder, or the Neo? Master also applies. Now, if you don't know the comic he's talking about, it's Die. It's a comic about a bunch of kids trapped in this tabletop RPG world. And these are all the various classes that the comic made up, and also apparently this playable version, so that's really fun. And well, that's kind of a lot to try to dig into. Stuff like the Fool, who I think you need to be very devil-may-care or very silly or lackadaisical, or else the effects of being the Fool stop working. Or the Master, who is just reality warping mage type. And the Emotion Knight, in a very, very psychopirate kind of way, use someone else's emotions in order to fulfill some sort of goal. The Dictator is similar to that as well, so there's lots of emotional stuff in play here. Godbinder, that kind of speaks for itself, and the Neo is a drug addict picked kind of rogue. And well, I think that's all pretty bad. And I guess I would have to go for Emotion Knight because it's less like Dictator, but also I think more balanced. Like I think that there's quite a lot of stuff that can go against me. I think Dictator leaves a lot of room, while I think with Emotion Knights, you definitely do have some leeway to really keep yourself in check. So yeah, no, I think that would be fun to play. Well, maybe not be, because I think all these would suck to be like in the comic itself. But to play, yeah, no, Emotion Knight has the best name. It can be any kind of emotion. Pretty fun, I think. So I hope that really thorough analysis why I didn't want to be any of the other classes was able to satiate you, Mitch Gosser. I need to get back into this comic. I kind of dropped off it, but it does seem like it's been having a lot of fun, and it definitely warrants another look-see. Hopefully, I didn't make a horrible choice in choosing that if I go back to read it. Thank you for the question. It was so fun to think about, and it was so fun looking up and reading through to see what kind of powers and what kind of drawbacks each of these classes have. A lot of interesting thinking. Anyway, I just want to say thank you to both Mitch and AkiCap for the question this week. It meant a lot, and I want to say thank you to everyone out there who has ever sent in a question or a comment. It means so much, and I am so grateful, and it's a blast every time. I really have so much enjoyment with those. Thank you all. It's really, really humbling and heartening, so thank you so much. And so if anyone out there has their own questions, comments, or topics they want to hear discussed on the show, you can find me on Twitter at THE_SNICKMAN. I also want to give a shout out to the cover artists of the show at DOTEMCEE. Please check them out. They're awesome. And well, again, thank you so much for listening in this week. I hope you had a great time. Next week we see the premiere of Krypton Season 2, so I can't wait to review more of that. It's been a great first season, so hopefully second season starts with a bang. Anyway, have a great week and see you then.